welcome to Just the Worst AMA podcast, episode number 5 to be perfectly precise. I'm your host, Billy Donnelly, who you can find at JoeBlow.com. This is Infamous, and of course, right here at Just the Worst podcast. And well, the show title says it all. This is the AMA podcast, Ask Me Anything. So we go out, we ask for you to submit your questions, your inquiries, whatever it is on your mind. It doesn't have to be about any specific thing. It could be about movies, could be about TV, could be about love, could be about life, whatever it is that you have on your mind. Food, I don't really care. The point is to sort of open up the mailbag, break down the walls, let you interact as best as we possibly can, and let you sort of submit your direct question to me for me to answer it here on the show. And that's the way we work every single week. That's the way we're going to work this particular week, and that's the way we're going to continue to roll as long as you continue to submit some really interesting and intriguing and thought-provoking inquiries to me for this particular show to work. So I've got a pair of questions that came in this week, and as we have the mics rolling right now, we have put the call out to all our social media outlets, so to Instagram, to Facebook, to Twitter, for anybody who wants to submit them. So so keep your eyes out in the future for that. And we'll give out all the URLs and handles later for you to be able to do that. But keep your eyes out for that, because when we make a call to action for you to go ahead and submit your questions to us, that's when we really want them. So we'll get to that a little bit later in the show. But for right now, let's just kick it right off. Let's get right into the meat of the show, the two questions that I got coming at me, and we'll see where they take us from there. So actually, it's funny because we have questions from a pair of brothers this week, so we'll handle them both separately, but that's how it seems to be operating on this particular week. I don't know if they're twins, paternal twins, just brothers of different ages. Either way, it's cool that, see, it's like a family get-together when you get to submit questions to us on this end. So let's dive right into this. These are from the McNatt Boys. I guess we'll put it that way. The McNatt Boys. It's kind of fun to say it that way. But yeah, so we'll start off with Brian McNatt's question to us here, and this is how he lays it out for us. He says, it seems like every month at least there's news of some new writer or producer being brought on board for the long-awaited next installments of the big slasher franchises, such as Friday the 13th and Halloween. Is this simply a point where people aren't interested enough in the horror subgenre for any real traction to be made, or should the franchises be abandoned, at least for the time being? Well, there's a lot to sort through there, but this isn't all that unheard of, and it's not all that confusing as far as this being sort of the way the development process works. You know, the studios own the rights to these franchise pieces, these properties that have been around for a long time, have sort of been bankable on one level or another, and as a result, they want to continue to mine or look at or examine ways that they might be able to bring them back and rejuvenate them for a fresh flow of cash, a new line of revenue that they could bring in, rather than sort of just allowing this thing to sit on the shelf and collect dust and not really do anything for them, for their bottom line. And look, let's face it, horror films, the reason that horror films have largely been successful for the studios is that they are able to be made for relatively small budgets and using not really any sort of A-list talent, any sort of big names. It's really the horror icons like a Freddy or a Jason or a Leatherface that are able to sort of bring in the audiences. That's who lures crowds into the theaters. That's who puts asses in the seats. It's not the people getting killed. It's the people who are doing the killing. Not even the actor inside the makeup or the mask. It's just the character itself. So when you look at something like Saw, for example, which they're maybe looking to bring back, Halloween, which they've been trying to figure out how to rejuvenate, Friday the 13th, which they've been looking at, that they've been trying to figure out a way to do Nightmare on Elm Street and bring back Freddy Krueger again after sort of that reboot of Nightmare on Elm Street with Jackie Earle Haley, which didn't really work. And was kind of just fell on deaf ears. So there's a number of different things that along the way can go. It's just a matter of doing it the right way, because as we saw with the most recent Friday the 13th reboot, also with the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot I mentioned, also some of the later Halloween films, the idea to try and redo Leatherface a couple of times, they didn't really work. Not because necessarily they rushed into them, but they just weren't good ideas, and they weren't really able to sort of capitalize on horror fandom. What mostly happened was they looked at horror fans and they said, well, we realize that you like all this stuff. We're just going to try and do the thing that you like already over again without adding anything new to the mix. And as a result, horror fans kind of rejected it, and newer fans, younger fans, the younger generation of people who might like horror in particular, they sort of rejected it because of the fact that they didn't necessarily have a strong connection to the material, to those characters. Remember, these are older characters. Nightmare on Elm Street came out in '84, I believe. The first Friday the 13th, I want to say, is 1980. I could be wrong on my date there, but let me just pull it up to make sure for clarification purposes, since I know somebody's going to correct me later. Anyway, the first Friday the 13th, yeah, is 1980. The first Halloween, you're going back into the late 70s, 78. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is in the early 70s, actually, 74. So you look at these films, and it's not that there's not interest in them. It's that we have so many things out there right now that you can't just call upon the franchise to bring people in and hope that that's going to be a big deal for you. If you look at the sort of the history of horror, and particularly the slasher genre, there's not really a lot of films that really went crazy at the box office. In the 90s, you had some along the way, films like Scream, which did really well. I Know What You Did Last Summer, the Final Destination films did fairly well. But by and large, the slasher genre, films like Friday the 13th, for example, even if we were to just pull up the most recent reboot, that's not a film that really broke the bank or did a lot. Even the later films didn't really do all that well box office wise. I think the biggest box office film that Friday the 13th had done, both worldwide. Oh, the reboot did, I think, 91 million worldwide, with like 65 of that coming in the US. But beyond that, the biggest film that those horror icons had been a part of was Freddy vs. Jason, which did like $82 million in the US, 114 worldwide. But 114 worldwide isn't really a lot. So when you're looking at these sort of slasher icons, they have built-in fan bases that are rabid, they're devoted, they love to come out and see these films. But something for the mainstream, they don't typically come out with the audiences don't typically come out and support those films. They just don't. Now, if you look at something like a Scream or I Know What You Did Last Summer, those are films that came around at the right time. They were built for sort of this late teen, early 20s sort of fan base. It was fresh and it was new and it was for that particular audience. It wasn't something that felt a little older, that didn't feel particularly made for those particular people. So that's why they sort of gravitated towards those films. So I don't know that the franchises need to be abandoned. You just need to sort of tweak them. You gotta either do one of two things. You either need to say, fuck it, we're not gonna go for the younger crowd who may not embrace these icons right now. we're going to make something specifically for the people who love those films in the past, who love those horror icons, who have an attachment to them maybe from their childhood, and make something specifically for them. It could be old school or whatnot, but make something that feels like a continuation, but also doesn't feel like the same old thing that they've done for 8, 9, 10 installments. And then beyond that, going beyond that, the other idea would be to tweak it, to modernize it, to make it something that, while it may have a connection to its original roots, feels very much of the current time. I hate to toss around the word meta because that seems to be something that everybody wants to sort of shoot for, but there needs to be something that connects with today's audiences, with sort of the technological advances, sort of the self-absorption even maybe, sort of a commentary on where we are today as a society, where millennials and whatever the hell is beyond millennials, where they are as a group, as a demographic, and speak to that. If you can connect to that, then you may be able to sort of prolong the franchises. I don't know that the franchises need to be abandoned, but you do need to come up with a good idea. One of the more recent ideas for Friday the 13th was, there were two actually. One was they were insistent upon trying to do something found footage, which I don't believe would have worked for a Jason Voorhees movie. I just don't know that the concept itself lends itself to that actually working out, because the primary goal or reason people go to see a Friday the 13th movie now is to sort of see Jason kill new campers in a creative way. So to sort of take away that and have everything's from the perspective of maybe one person, I don't know that that necessarily works story-wise. And the other thing was to sort of take it back into the 80s again, which as a throwback, now you got to figure out who this is for, because of the fact that we've moved forward. Look, I'm a fan of a film like Jason X, which was so ridiculous when they went into space. But you look at sort of the Friday the 13th movies, the first one did really well. Part 2 dipped. Part 3 went up from Part 2, but down from Part 1. And then they just proceeded to sort of go down in money. And the Friday the 13th movies, I believe, are the same. So you got to just come up with a fresh way to attack these properties. It can be done. You don't have to... There are certain rules I think you have to weigh in with and sort of be true to the characters in order to maybe lure in those people from the past who don't want to look at this as some sort of foreign entity. But at the same time, you have to be mindful of the fact that what worked 20, 25 years ago in the slasher film genre may not really remain fresh today. So you got to freshen it up, slap a fresh coat of paint on it, figure out a new way to attack it, and from there, you may see some new life in Friday the 13th, and Halloween, and Leatherface, and Freddy Krueger. So I do think that there is something to be done with that. It just seems like no one has found the right approach to making it happen. And until that happens, we're going to sort of just continue to see the same old meandering, lots of development on these characters trying to get them done. And I understand that they want to get them done. They want to make them happen. They want to bring them back to the screen again. But it's just a recipe for failure if you haven't cracked out the right way to do it in order to attract audiences today, because they're not mainstream projects. Exorcism films, haunted house films, those are more that attract the mainstream. Slasher films, there are some people who they won't go see them. They don't like the blood, they don't like the violence, they don't like the gore, and as a result, you're never going to get those people. So you got to figure out how to either get the hardcore horror or figure out how to get the mainstream. But I don't know that you can really dip your toe into both. You gotta sort of shit or get off the pot and figure out how you approach it from there. All right. So Brian, thank you very much for the question, man. I appreciate it. Aaron McNatt, his brother, has a question as well this week, wanting to know if I have any thoughts on the confirmation of a spin-off Transformers film for Bumblebee. The idea with Bumblebee is that they announced, I think, 3 more Transformers films to come. So Transformers 5, Transformers 6, Transformers 7, with them starting, I believe, in 2017 and going 2017, 2018, and 2019. In June of those months, I believe. It's either late May or June, to try and bring them out as, once again, these big summer blockbusters that do very well for Paramount. Hasbro's very happy with them, even though there are a contingent of people who just absolutely hate and loathe these fucking Transformers movies. Worldwide, there are people who eat them up. They just love their Transformers. They are devoted to the Transformers brand. It doesn't even matter if the movie is just sort of mindlessly idiotic. They just want to see giant robots fighting, and as a result, they'll pay their $15 or $20 in IMAX and 3D to be able to go and see this. So what we learned recently over the weekend was that Transformers 6 was going to be sort of a spin-off for Bumblebee. I guess an individual Bumblebee film is the idea, with sort of working, I guess, off of the Star Wars model now, which is to have an Episode 7, then, as we got Star Wars The Force Awakens, then we're going to get Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Then we're going to get Episode 8, then we might be getting young Han Solo / Boba Fett. Then we're going to get Episode 9, then we're going to get another standalone. So the idea is here, it appears, that Hasbro or Allspark Pictures, their production company, as well as Paramount, are going to now move forward and sort of create their own expanded universe for the Transformers. Because once again, as I say all the time, you ain't nobody if you don't have a connected shared universe. And Paramount doesn't really have one. I know they've been trying to get something going. There were talks of maybe doing something crossing over with G.I. Joe. There were a number of different things that they are sort of tossing about in order to sort of create their own universe once again. And it looks like they're just going to focus solely on the Transformers and figure out how, I guess, they can have their own spin-offs, their own standalones that emerge from the universe that they are creating. So, episode 6. Transformers number 6, excuse me, is now going to be a Bumblebee spin-off in a number of ways. So, with that said, what are my thoughts on it? I mean, look, people like the Transformers movies, and look, I don't, so it doesn't really affect me. I don't really give a shit. If you like them, more power to you. If you are, if you like them, then look, you get more. You're gonna get them on a regular basis. Now, do they risk run the risk of burning audiences out with too much Transformers? Of course, always. Anytime you have a Transformers film that seems to be coming every single year, they feel less special. We'll see if we start to get comic book movie superhero fatigue at any point, or Star Wars fatigue at any point, or now Transformers fatigue at any point. Because when you're just churning out films, they just start to lose their specialness. Now, whether or not they're good or not, that gives a big boost to you being excited about them coming around. But when they start to just feel monotonous, when you're just like, ugh, another one, that's where you start to run into some problems. So, look, the Bumblebee character is really interesting because the Bumblebee character does not speak in the Transformers universe that they've created for themselves. The Bumblebee character, through most of this point, has been someone who operates using the radio inside, playing different songs in order to convey emotions or communication of any sort. That's how the messaging goes about, is by using the radio. Now, whether or not that gimmick is going to just start to get tired, I imagine that it could very quickly, because it works in spurts. The reason that it's funny when it happens, and it's one of the more clever aspects of the Transformers films as far as I'm concerned, the reason that it works is because it just happens here or there. It's well timed. If you're doing that all the time, for like a 2-hour movie. Ugh. That just... Ugh. I don't know that I could handle that. Not that I could really handle Transformers Age of Extinction as it is, but a film of like that, that's constructed like that, ugh, and you know you're going to get human characters interacting with them too, ugh, Jesus Christ. It just sounds worse and worse the more I examine what this thing could possibly be. But look, as far as my thoughts on a spin-off Transformers film, it doesn't really surprise me. It seems like the logical step for Paramount to take in order to keep figuring out how to just soak money out of the Transformers franchise. Paramount doesn't really have a great deal going for itself right now, other than probably the Ninja Turtles and this. As far as franchises are concerned, they're not really in that game right now, after they got out of the Marvel business and let sort of Marvel Studios and Disney take everything over, selling out their rights and the distribution as far as that arrangement was concerned. So with that, this being really one of the only things that they have going for it, a shared universe idea, spin-offs and standalones, sort of examining a lot of these characters, that doesn't surprise me. I wouldn't be surprised to see an announcement coming that they may do something similar for G.I. Joe, as far as examining individual characters on maybe individual smaller missions. So yeah, I think this seems to be sort of business as usual. I'm not really thrown for a loop by the announcement that it's happening. I hope for Transformers fans' sake that they make these films somewhat good and that they're not just cash-ins to keep capitalizing on the Transformer name, knowing that Transformer fans will come out and basically support anything that has a Transformers name on it. So with that said, look, I hope they can make this decent. Okay, is that too high a bar to set? I just hope for a decent Bumblebee spinoff. If not, then that's where they should be aiming, and good luck to them. So thanks, Aaron, for that question coming in. I got one more question. Once again, like I said, you could ask me anything. And this is proof. So Javier Sanchez sends me in a question and wants to know, so we are short of justice in the Supreme Court. Thoughts? Well, I didn't expect to get political on the podcast today. But look, here's the deal. There's all this talk about whether or not the president should or should not be able to nominate someone to fill the vacant Supreme Court seat that was left by the death of Antonin Scalia. And there's all this idea talking about, we should save it for the next president. Oh, this president's a lame duck. As far as I remember, and this goes back to the Constitution as well, is that there is an obligation, a duty to fill a vacant Supreme Court seat as quickly and as possible, because that's how the government works, particularly the judicial branch of the government, namely the Supreme Court. Having 8 people on the bench doesn't really work unless you sort of have overwhelming majorities. But the way that things have worked with the Supreme Court recently, in recent years, everything seems to be sort of just a 4-4 split. So you're going to need someone to break the ties. You need someone to be, to tip the scales, to sort of, send the seesaw one way or the other. And it's the government's responsibility, be it the president and the Congress, to nominate and confirm someone to then sit on the bench and fill the vacancy in the Supreme Court. A lame duck president is a concept invented by people. It's not in any law. It's not in the Constitution. It's not in any part of how we operate. The president himself is elected to serve a 4-year term. If he's reelected, it's another 4-year term. So that's 8 years. You don't get to go into the final year of the presidency and say, well, he's leaving in a year, he doesn't get to do anything. That's not how government works. You don't get to sort of shut down the governing process that the people need because what, you don't like the other side? You're not getting your way? That's not how it works. And you know, this is the way it works with a Democratic president, and Republicans want to be obstructionist on the congressional level. I would feel the same way if it was a Republican president and the Democrats were in power on the congressional level. The thing of it is that they are supposed to serve the American people, not necessarily their party, not their ideology. Whoever is wherever is supposed to serve the American people. And what best serves the American people? A full and functional Supreme Court. Not one that has an empty chair sitting and waiting because people can't get things done. So here's what I would recommend, especially for the president, having now seen the Republican Congress say that they're not going to confirm anyone, they're going to sort of ride this thing out, in which case now you have a giant mess because, once again, the election is until November, the new president isn't inaugurated until January. The first thing they're not going to do is this, so you still have to go through confirmation hearings and votes. So you're looking at possibly a year and a half to 2 years before that vacant seat is filled. That's ridiculous. So if I were the president right now, especially now in an election cycle heading towards November, continue to nominate people. And if the Congress elects to not take it up for a confirmation hearing or not give it a vote or continues to sort of obstruct and show that they're not going to act with the president to get a Supreme Court justice in place, that works in your favor and your party's favor heading towards the election. Now, there may be people ideologically who will say, no, that's not the way to do it. I support this, and I'm not going to go against that. Well, those people aren't going to vote for you anyway. But the way that this election cycle seems to be operating, which is that people are angry, they're pissed off, they're frustrated that government doesn't work for them or represent them. If you show the argument that, once again, that is happening, that is how you rally people towards your cause. That is how you rally votes for your candidates. That is how you win elections. That is how you get to govern the way you want. So, Javier Sanchez wasn't expecting to go political, but we did. So thank you for the question. Went totally different than I would have ever expected. But as once again, I show AMA Podcast, ask me anything. So if it comes down to that, and that's what you want to ask me about, by all means, go ahead and do it. Just give it a scan of all the social media networks. I think that's all the questions that came in for this particular week. So thank you very much for sending them in. Whether it was by Instagram, whether it was by Twitter, whether it was by Facebook, I appreciate it. And as a result, once again, pretty interesting show. It sort of scanned a number of topics. And for that, I'm very grateful for your participation. And hopefully next week, you'll be involved as well once again. Make sure you follow all of our social media accounts. Hit us up on the Twitter, at JTW Podcast. That's the official Just the Worst Podcast Twitter handle. So that will let you know anytime any new episodes go up. So at JTW Podcast. Also, at Tis Infamous, TIS Infamous. That is the official podcast, the official, not podcast handle, that's the official handle of This Is Infamous, which is our home. So by all means, hit that up for all the things that we have coming through This Is Infamous. As far as, look, we got lots of announcements coming as far as This Is Infamous is concerned. So be sure to tune in there. And myself, you can follow all of my random ramblings and musings at Infamous Kid with 2 Ds at the end. Also, once again, on Twitter. Facebook, facebook.com/justtheworstpodcast, facebook.com/tisinfamous, and facebook.com/BillyTheKid. Hit all of those up and follow me, follow us, and you'll get all the information that you need coming as far as what it is that we're doing. SoundCloud.com, that's where all the podcasts right now are housed. So SoundCloud.com/justtheworstpodcast. Every show, every episode, that's where you find it. And whether you're on Android or on your Apple, you make sure you head on over and you download the SoundCloud app so you can have all the podcasts in your pocket anytime you want. Stick those in your pockets, and you can have every single show with you on the go all the time, so you can pull up anything. Whether you're sitting in your car, you're going for a run, whatever it is you want, my awesome voice will carry you through, so you can knock out any one of those podcasts at any point in time. So Just the Worst Podcast, that's SoundCloud.com/justtheworstpodcast, or on the SoundCloud app. All the podcasts will be coming up soon as well to thisisinfamous.com. We're getting that ready. It should be very soon, so stay tuned for that. And you can find my work on a regular basis at joeblow.com. This is Infamous, once it's ready, and but This Is Infamous YouTube channel, which is active, and right here at Just the Worst Podcast. This has been Just the Worst AMA Podcast, episode number 5. I have been your host, Billy Donnelly. We'll see you next week. Get some new questions in at any of those social media accounts, and have yourself a pleasant, immediate future. I'll see you next week. Peace. Just the Worst AMA Podcast, episode number 5, has been a presentation of Just the Worst Podcast Media.